in and out. I'm always paranoid something's not going to work. But
No, we're killing it here.
But that hasn't happened yet.
Right on.
Not good.
It's not like this is going live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
When does
Despite
it-
the name.
Yeah. Kingston Live asterisk.
On this episode of Kingston Live, we talk studios with Aaron Holmberg and Zane Whitfield, and Infotourist drops a new politically charged album just in time for the election. Thank you, Kingston. This is Kingston Live, where we discuss everything happening in the first capital of Canadian music. I'm Johnny San.
I'm Riley Jabour.
And just a reminder that we are on a number of platforms. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Google, Apple, Stitcher. And we would like to hear from you as well. If you have any comments, any feedback, podcast at kingstonlive.ca. We'll just jump into it and introduce our first guest. Infotourist is a mysterious band. Like a political campaign, they pop up in town every few years, make some noise at a handful of appearances, and then seemingly vanish back into the city's musical woodwork until they rise again for their next cycle. And their lyrics are equally political. Like some of the greatest punk bands, their songs are full of satire and critique, but Infotourist's sound ties them closer to bands like Muse or Arcade Fire, with sprawling, turbulent melodies underscoring their messages. These qualities are in full effect on the forthcoming album, The Election, their manifesto on the current state of the world and its leaders, set to drop with a show at the Mansion on October 19th. And today we're joined by singer and lyricist Jason Erb and drummer Tim Forbes.
So,
How's it going?
Hey.
All right.
Feeling good.
And Jason, I think we all want to thank you for teaching us a new word in our email exchange. I asked Jason, is there anything specific you want to talk about? And he said, no, we can approach it extemporaneously. I was like, ooh, what is that? That's neat. And
I actually think I said I'm okay with extemporaneity, which I
geez.
almost
Yeah,
couldn't
like
say just now.
next level.
you can type it. It's like Star Wars. I think it was Harrison Ford said to George Lucas, you can type this shit, but you can't say it.
That's right.
The man didn't write for reading aloud. Yes.
He wrote exclusively for himself.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, I give Pete a hard time. Our writer Pete, I give him a hard time about that as well. But he's getting better. This one flowed very nicely.
Oh, I thought that was an amazing intro.
Yes. There you go, Pete. Good job. But for the record, extemporaneous, for those who want to know, it means it was like with little or no preparation, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how I roll.
So let's get into it. Let's talk about your sound first. Our producer, Rob, he likened your sound, and I'm quoting, to The Deers meets Muse, fronted by Hawksley Workman. Do you agree with that? How would you describe your sound?
I love all those bands, so I'll take it. Love it. Yeah, I can hear what he's saying. Yeah, I dig it. We just I try to write songs that I think are interesting, and I try to write songs that I like. So, and those are all bands that I like. So, mission accomplished.
Now, you guys you sort of take the Tool approach in terms of releases. There's big gaps. Like, I think a lot of people these days try to keep some momentum. There are gaps in the release here. Is that deliberate? What's the story?
So, we were together a decade ago. We played some shows. We did a tiny EP. Then we did a single, and we started recording a larger EP called The Employee. But Tim left the band. We had a new drummer, and then he moved away, and we got caught up in having young children, and we got involved in different bands. I went to the Gertrudes. I was playing with them for quite a while, and Infotourist sort of dissipated. And then recently, I mean, we're all still buddies, and so we were talking about political troubles, and we thought it would be a good time to dust off and resurrect the old Infotourist cadaver.
Such a great image. Dust off the cadaver.
Put some electrodes on that thing. Some paddles. What do you call those things? Cha-chunk. And
Defibrillators.
Defibrillators.
Oh, yeah.
Another
Thank
big
you.
word.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you said in this interview.
Yeah. I'm just going to say big words from now on.
Thank you, Tim. So, and we got it back together. And so I had written a bunch. I write songs all the time. I'd written a bunch dealing with what I saw going on politically. At the time, I was pretty obsessed with U.S. politics in addition to Canadian politics. I was a big Bernie Sanders guy the first time around. Mm-hmm. And I actually went to the United States to canvass for Bernie Sanders. I went to New Hampshire and I knocked on doors, and then I went to Syracuse and knocked on doors. And
they let you do that?
Yeah, I just showed up at the campaign headquarters, and I'm like, hey, I'm a Canadian.
Pretended to be American?
No, I'm like, hey,
really?
I'm Canadian. I just drove in. Can I do something? And they were like, yeah, sure. What are you doing here? And but it was a good story. Like people, and I'd knock on people's doors. I would say, like, I came all the way from Canada to tell you that this is an important election, so don't screw it up. And so it was good, but Bernie Sanders lost despite my trip.
Then they screwed it up, basically.
They screwed it up.
Specifically told them not to.
Yeah, and what happened, what I foresaw happened. I figured that Hillary would lose, Trump would win, and that happened. So these songs are a couple of these songs are about how I saw the Democratic Party's kneecap Bernie Sanders. And they just kept doing these terrible, terrible things, these devious, just terrible.
There's a great quote I remember seeing a while back. For every horrible thing that's happened in the U.S. for the last 30 years, there's a video of Bernie Sanders trying to stop it.
Yeah, it's true. Like there are photos of him chained to people. Like when he was in school, he was chained to people. They were protesting racism in, it was like the University of Chicago. They were denying the residents. They were turning down black people or something like that. There he was. Yeah, but he's like, it's like Forrest Gump, like seeing him in different historical situations, photoshopped in.
Yeah, totally.
So the songs, that's where the songs, a couple of the songs.
So it's more motivated because, the album's political. I listened to the whole thing last night. Rob sent it to me.
Congratulations.
It sounds great.
Thank you.
I enjoyed the album. Some of the political stuff, I get caught up in the music, so lyrical stuff tends to be secondary for me, but it's certainly there. But I'm interested to hear that it sounds like it's more motivated by American politics than Canadian, or is it's maybe a bit of both?
It's both. So I try to be universal in the songs. I wrote a song a long time ago called "America Will Hide Me from the World," and it was very specific and American, and all the references are completely out of date now. And so I didn't want to do that anymore. So I tried to make it universal. There's one song that's explicitly about Trump. That's "Untakeable," where I've got him strangling a baby in the opening
with his tiny little
stanza.
hands.
Yeah. The line was, before the president strangled the infant to show us the size of his hand. He said, anyway. So I took a little liberty there. But the rest, I try to make them universal. I try to draw the universal out of it. So like the first song, Election Correction, that was written about how it came from what I was talking about, where when they were doing the primaries and selecting the Democratic candidate, they were doing all these underhanded things. And then afterwards, they fired the scapegoat, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and then like, hey, we're okay now, right? After they had disenfranchised, tens of or hundreds of thousands of voters, mostly minorities, people who would support Bernie Sanders, like half of Brooklyn was just stricken from the rolls, and that's where Bernie Sanders comes from. Anyway, I don't want to get into that stuff. I'm clearly still sore about it.
We're all a bit sore about these things.
Yeah. So the song is about, like, the song starts, now that you're all good and dead, we asked forgiveness and nodded your heads. So, like, nodded the heads of the dead people. And then they sent off a scapegoat and all that stuff. And then it's about election correction. So it's like, I felt like they had killed the movement. There was so much excitement about Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders, I'm convinced, would have taken the general election. There was so much excitement about him, and they just killed it. And then they're like, well, sorry, guys, but we dealt with the scapegoat here, and so now we're good, right? So that's the first song. Second song was kind of about the same thing, about how they killed the movement, and was there ever even a chance? It's called Were We Ever Even Close? And then those two are about that subject, but the rest kind of look at, it's kind of like an essay, or various essays on the subject. The different songs kind of look at elections from different angles. The song Undo, it's about how people just, in elections, people vote for somebody and then they get grumpy about that person, and then they vote for the opposite person, and then they get grumpy about that person, and then they vote for the opposite person, and it just keeps going back and forth, and nothing changes. Both of the parties are usually corrupt in their own unique and special ways. I mean, I think the left is better than the right, but climate change is an emergency, and nobody's doing anything about it or doing what they should be doing about it.
Yeah.
So that's what Undo is about. So it's just about general stuff. We've got a sample from Tommy Douglas in one of the songs, so it's like there's the Canadian content. Mm-hmm. That's at the end of the album. So the album, we tried to take it on a sort of an emotional narrative arc. So we start with this...
Would you call this a concept album?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And it goes on an arc. So the first, it's dark at the start. Yeah, and there's some other stuff in there too. Forgiveness Was a Mistake isn't really about elections so much as demagogues, these right-wing demagogues that come along and they're brandishing the cross and whatever, but they're not really. I mean, they would have thrown Jesus into a cage at the border or something.
Well, yeah, I think Pete and I were talking about that recently. We're like, a lot of these guys, if they met Jesus, they would not like him.
No.
I don't think they realize that.
Yeah. So that one's about, I just had to get that out. So that song's about, if all these bigoted jerks are going to heaven, they're getting forgiven and going to heaven. Then, yeah. So, yeah. And so the song is about like heaven pleading with Satan to take these jerks away from heaven because they're spoiling the place. Take them back. And the chorus is, forgiveness was a mistake. It was a mistake to forgive these people and let them in here.
I like this. I find that there's a dearth of subversion in rock music these days. I'm not really sure why. Like, I find this refreshing because the spirit of rock music has always been sort of subversion and rebellion and that sort of thing. And I find it's just been really safe the last several years. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We can't have it all be angry music necessarily. But I don't know. I remember when he who I refuse to name in this podcast was elected, I had a conversation with somebody. He's like, well, the good thing about this is we'll get lots of great angry punk music. But I'm not sure that really happened. I think a lot of us expected, there's going to be all this protest music and stuff. But I don't know. I don't think it's really there. Maybe there's some of it. But
people are getting worn down, I think. And it's become the norm that the leaders suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, people are just... getting jaded about this stuff.
Yeah, we just expect them to be corrupt.
Yeah.
It almost feels like, too, like all of the energy one could put into writing like really political songs, it's worn so many people down that they don't have that energy. And then they're also like, well, shit, like I can't write a song about this because he's literally like putting people in cages until they die. Like I kind of need to address that more directly than writing a song right now, Like, it's tricky.
It's tricky, and it's tough to know what to do. It's tough to know what to do about the climate crisis. It's tough to know what to do about Doug Ford and about Trump and all these terrible things. Jair Bolsonaro, who's burning down the Brazilian rainforest right now. This stuff, I think about this stuff daily, and I don't know what to do about it. So, I mean, one thing I can do is write songs about it and try to make them compelling, but I don't know.
Well, another thing you can do is even just talk about it like we're doing right now.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people would rather just avoid things. I mean, there's so much political comedy these days, and it is great to see the humor in it, but at some point it's like we need to actually do something. It's not funny anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, comedy's important too. I mean,
totally.
The great comedians, they're almost like preachers or something. They or philosophers. They find this kernel of truth and they figure out a way to make it resonate. Nothing resonates quite as well as if you can make people laugh about it. It's like if you can make that punchline happen and people get that sense of surprise to the point where they have to laugh, then it's almost like Inception. That idea is planted. It's like when you. That's like the moment of inception when you have that epiphany and it's so strong that you have to laugh, So
and humor is such a there's a universality to it. Everybody likes to laugh, and if you can get all those people laughing at the same thing, even if they disagree, I think that's something.
Yeah, that's true too.
I liked what John Cleese said. He said that comedy's important because it gives a sense of proportion. It sort of says, hey, let's not take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
Everything can be funny.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, bringing people down to size that need to be brought down to size sometimes too. Yeah, and I like having fun with songs. I remember Gord Downey, in an interview, he said he wrote the song The Inevitability of Death because he wanted to hear radio announcers say the inevitability of death on the air. And so, I mean, in Forgiveness Was a Mistake, I wanted to be screaming about Satan. I wanted to have heaven. I thought it'd be fun to have heaven saying, "Satan, forgive us." Sometimes I like to push it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And see if I can back my way out of it. Which the great comedians do. They'll I've heard of comedians. I listen to a lot of comedian podcasts, and what they'll do is they'll intentionally. I think some comedians had a dare. They tried to turn the audience against them immediately and then see if they could win them back. Yeah, and the other comedians were in the back of the room watching. It's just a group of friends.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I like that. Just like creating some chaos.
Yeah,
Let's see if
now
you
that
can
you
work
mentioned,
your
I've
way
seen
out of
that
it.
before too. I can't think of a specific example, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Bill Burr was talking about it.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah.
I love Bill Burr. Should we get back to, I don't know, music? I think we could talk all day about why
Politics
the world
and
is
comedy
falling
and the world
apart.
ending. Yeah.
But yeah, you got something you want to bring up?
Yeah, well, let's roll back the tape to when you mentioned earlier the space in between Infotourist albums, where it took you like the better part of a decade, right, between this release and your previous release. Oftentimes, for bands, a space like that might be indicative of just people, real life getting in the way, growing up, having kids, moving away, all that jazz. But also the fact that you were working with other projects, the fact that you spent so much time in the Gertrudes is, I think, really powerful to speak to the music scene in Kingston, that you can be a working musician that long in multiple projects and then be able to revisit a project that you feel so passionate about. It's kind of weird to say from an outsider perspective, speaking of Infotourist, but being able to put Infotourist on the shelf for that long and then revisit it after spending all of that time still playing music in Kingston, what did you see the evolution like in that decade or so? Oh,
well, yeah, the music scene is really at a high right now. I feel like, I go out all the time. I live downtown. I often walk downtown to the Toucan or Musiki or whatever, Blue Martini, head over to the mansion, and there's always stuff happening. It's amazing. And all these people, it's a great scene. I'm friends with a lot of these people, and they play in different bands, and I've jammed with different people and, jumped on stage with different people. And it's great. I love it. So the evolution of the scene, I'm sure a lot of people have come out here and theorized about why Kingston's so great for music. I think it's a combination of, we have a really concentrated downtown. I think Kingston's a really unique town in Canada because the downtown is so walkable and concentrated, and it's not a huge town, but per capita there's so many music scenes, so many venues that are supporting music, and there seem to be, I don't know why there are so many musicians here. Maybe it's like a cause and effect thing because of the venues, but it's a great town. It's my favorite. I'd say it's my favorite city in Canada. I love it. What was the question?
I think that covers it. Just the evolution of the music scene in Kingston over the space between releases.
Something that occurred to me recently, and I think you almost touched on this, is in Kingston it's neat. It's sort of big enough that there's all this talent, but it's small enough that it becomes a community. And I realized it could be one of the few places where you can be a fan of an artist and a friend of the artist at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. When I go see bands, I know so many of the people on stage,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a family. It's like a big family.
Totally.
I love it.
Let's get back to the album. The album drops.
Please, let's talk about us. Forget all these other bands.
The album specifically, the album drops on the 19th, correct?
Yep. Yeah, that is correct. We're playing a show at the Mansion, and the album is dropping. We've also dusted off that employee album that we started during our first incarnation, and that will be going online very soon as well. And we haven't put our other stuff online either yet, so that'll be happening too. So
cool.
We're going to be bombarding the universe with music very shortly.
Awesome. Now, with the election, are there going to be physical copies available?
Well, we've had a lot of people ask for physical copies, so there will at some point. Whether it's at the show or not, we'll see. Possibly. We're trying.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel like when we got back together, we were talking politics, and and drinking beer, and
We'd get together every couple times every year ever since the band broke up.
Yeah,
because
we're all buddies
too. Yeah.
And so Tim was like, "Let's do it. I mean, all this political stuff is happening. Let's get it back together." And so we did. But we were just kind of at practices. We played a couple of shows, and then we started recording these songs. But as we started playing them and recording them, we realized that it was really good. We really like this music, and I think the album is I'm most proud of this album. I'm more proud of this album than anything else I've done musically. I feel like these guys are musical geniuses, every one of them, and the songs are great. And the album is this. It's exactly what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. It feels really good. And so now now that we've got this album, I feel an urgency to get it out there and to do as much as we can and push it and play and get the message out. I feel like I can't think of words anymore. It's incumbent upon us at this time in history.
Good one.
How about that?
This has been the most literate Kingston Live to date. I love it. Well, that's great. Like I said, I heard the whole album. I loved it. I think it's great. Did you get to listen to it?
I didn't listen to every track. I listened to the singles and I think one or two. Yeah, a couple of tracks. Because the singles are like track 1, 2, and 4, I think, right?
I think so. We haven't really decided.
Well,
but
I was going to ask, because we're going to play one of your songs in a moment. Which one are we going to hear?
I think we're hearing track 2. That's Were We Ever Even Close. So that was when the Democratic Party ground down the Bernie Sanders movement. But it's also about the greater thing. It's about is sometimes these grassroots movements feel hopeless. Like, were we ever even close? Did we actually make progress, or are we ever going to? Like, is this machine just too big and too powerful? So. That's what that song is really about. I had to get that stuff out. So that's Were We Ever Even Close. And I want to say about the whole album, it is kind of a concept album. It does follow a narrative arc, and it just it starts off dark, and then by the middle we sort of explore elections from different angles, and then by the end it's tidal wave come. It's like the end of the world. Climate change happens. Everything's washed away by a tidal wave, and then there's this soundscape. It's like the destruction of the earth, and then the last song is "It's Time to Be Free," and that's like that's the thesis of the album, really. And all the songs kind of flow together. So we really want people to listen to the album as a whole, which nobody does anymore. But the album is designed. I mean,
I did that last night.
Yeah.
So
I listened to the first half.
So. Yeah, but I mean, also we've got singles, and we try to make every song stand
we
alone
want to be
and all that
accessible
stuff.
too. But
Well, that's something I always push is I think, music needs to be more deliberate. I know a lot of people have this sort of casual approach to music where it's on in the background, but I think there's a place for that, and there's a place to just let's sit and just listen and just be a human and absorb it for a little while.
Yeah, it's true. The context that music is listened to is so important in the making of music. When you're making music, it's important to think, how do I want this music to be experienced? And we've got a couple of the songs are kind of dancey songs, like "Forgiveness Was a Mistake."
Totally.
I wanted the guiding principle in that song is getting asses moving. So
you wanted to sing about Satan and have people dancing at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of did. And track 4, "They Washed Our Brains White as Snow." That one's like a...
I really like that one.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and that one's cut like a... And that one is about "Wash Our Brains White as Snow." That one's a universal song. It's about people that get caught up in their sort of echo chambers, in every part of the political spectrum. There are so many echo chambers out there, and I used to think that they really only existed on the right, but they exist everywhere. Mm-hmm. And people get sucked into these things, and with Facebook communities, if somebody disagrees with you, just unfriend immediately. And so what you end up with is this you're in this bubble of people that have exactly the same views as you, and so you can reinforce these extreme views. And so I think that's why racism is bubbling up in a way that it hasn't in a long time. And all these people who want to shoot up a school, they can find other people that want to... Flat Earth, exactly.
Yeah, you can find any group of people that support any outrageous notion.
Yeah, and they just reinforce each other and amp each other up in these insular communities. And so that's kind of what Wash Our Brains White as Snow is about.
Well, I like this discussion. Like, I've always felt that, in the music world and entertainment in general, there's sort of entertainment that's there to kind of distract you from real life. And then there's the stuff that exposes it for what it is, and that's art. So congratulations on taking that route.
Nice.
And thank you for it.
Right on.
You mentioned with the song Were We Ever Even Close, and talking about the grassroots political movement of the Bernie Sanders support. Do you think, and this is maybe getting a little too esoteric and out there or whatever.
Oh, do it,
but
man.
When we're talking about the artistry of creating really poignant art, there almost is a grassroots movement to being a musician or being any level of artist where you build your audience and you build your fans and they believe in you and they spread the word, similar to the way that a grassroots political movement supports a person like Bernie Sanders. Do you believe that there is an intrinsic tie between politics in that sense and artistry when you're trying to create a message in the same sort of way?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't think music works well when it's dictated by a corporation. Like in the 90s, all those corporate post-grunge bands that came out that were just sort of handed to us by these big record labels, it was all crap, So, I think music is always best when, political movement is always best when people just really love music and they need to go see shows and tell their friends, and they need to, that's the way it should be, as opposed to these type A manufactured bands, or these type A personalities that form these bands, but they're mediocre songwriters, but amazing workhorses, and they whatever. I think so. Yeah, that's a great parallel. I like that. Nice.
Cool.
So vote for Infotourist.
Yay!
October 21st, right? Infotourist on your ballot.
And I want to say this about elections. So it's easy to get disheartened about the way elections work in Canada. I was really excited when Trudeau said that this would be the last election, would be the last first past the post election. That was a complicated sentence because I said last first. But and then he went back on that. He was like, yeah, I was just kidding about that, the election stuff. And so that I was out protesting with a bunch of people about that. And it's disheartening to be in a system where you can't vote for the person you really like necessarily. You have to sort of vote for the least evil. So what I would say about that is there are a lot of forms of activism out there. There are a lot of ways you can change things, and voting is only one. And I think the way our voting system is now, you just sort of have to be realistic about it. And the only job, and when you go into that voting booth, your only job is to make sure that the biggest jerk doesn't win. That's really all you can do. And anything beyond that, join Extinction Rebellion, or protest, write letters, talk to politicians,
make some music,
murder some billionaires.
Yeah,
eat the rich.
Sorry, that was long. You can edit that.
That's okay. It's all good stuff.
Whoops, I bumped the mic. Still good?
That's okay. Those mics can take a lot of abuse.
All right.
We took those back to the farm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they came out just fine.
Wow, I thought I smelled beer and vomit on that.
Oh, that's just me.
Well, is there anything else we want to cover, or should we get to the music?
Oh, let's get to the music, brother.
All right. Well, this is Were We Ever Even Close by Infotourist on Kingston Live, and we'll see you on the 19th at the Mansion.
Right on. Thanks a lot for having us.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Amazing.
God, I didn't say much.
He says defibrillators.
Don't hold me down. I said, don't hold me down. Don't hold me down, 'cause I won't get up. Don't waste your chains. Don't stain your boots. Don't shoot your rounds, 'cause we won't get up. All the king's horses couldn't pick us up. Lockouts, were we ever even close? Blowout, blackouts, were we ever even close? Could we ever be so close, so close, so close? So close, so close, so close. Don't break your nail, deleting your mail. No room in jail, 'cause we're all inside. And don't waste a breath, denying your theft. We thought the left was on our side. Now I can't tell my left from my right. Record correctors, were we ever even close? Ejected electors, were we ever even close? Supers, stormtroopers, were we ever even close? Neuter prosecutors, were we ever even close? Could we ever be so close, so close, so close? So close, so close, so close. So close, so close, so close, so close, so close. Everybody's got an outfit for the revolution. Everybody's got a haircut for the revolution. Everybody's got a playlist for the revolution. Everybody's got a hot take for the revolution. Everybody's raised their glass to the revolution. And everybody signed their name to the revolution. Everybody said amen to the revolution. But where is our revolution? I said where is our revolution? Oh, what more will it take for a revolution? I don't know.
October 17th, my boys, Pop at the Ale House. It might actually be sold out right now. There was a low ticket alert at the time of recording, so get your tickets if they're still available.
October 19th, the YGK Music Series, the second in this series, presented by Spearhead, KPP, and ourselves. This time, Infotourist, along with No Guff, that's at the Mansion.
That might be No Guff's first show in Kingston. I could be wrong.
Yes, because from what I understand, No Guff is formerly 47 Teeth.
Yes, the spin-off, I guess you could say, of 47 Teeth. Some slight lineup changes, but I'm excited to hear some No Guff. October 22nd, Jessica Mitchell and Abby Stewart at the Mansion.
Worth noting, Abby Stewart, one of the YGK Emerging Music Competition finalists. October 22nd, Bruce Coburn is at the Grand Theater.
Once again, we've got some tickets to give away for another entry in the Grand Onstage series. This time, we've got tickets to see Juno Award-winning singer-songwriter Matt Mays on November 7th for his Howl at the Night tour.
Mays has always stepped between heavier rock and rootsy acoustic music, and on this tour, he's doing something interesting. He's combining the two. He's kicking off the night with one of his more sort of intimate theater kind of shows, and then he builds to a full band show later on.
He's also joined by Toronto singer-songwriter Sky Wallace, who will be opening the show. Shout out to my friend Gina, who plays bass for Sky Wallace.
Have you've seen Skye Wallace?
On Instagram? No, I've never seen Skye Wallace.
No,
live.
I just asked because Rob and I saw her maybe 2 or 3 months ago at the Mansion, and she was great. She's worth the price of admission alone. So, and yeah, we have tickets for that show. Follow us on Instagram for your chance to win. And, of course, subscribe to Grand On Stage by going to kingstongrand.ca.
November 7th, Dwayne Gretzky, the greatest cover band in Canada, is playing at the Ale House.
November 16th, the Arkells are at the Leon Center once again.
Tuesdays are open mic night at Musiki and Riverhead Brewing Company, and Jazz Night at Olivea.
Wednesday is open mic night at the Rose and Crown with Tom Savage.
Folk Wednesdays with the Goodnight Irenes at Musiki.
Live music at the Toucan every Monday, Friday, and Saturday night.
For details on these events and others, along with lots of other things to do, places to eat, and places to stay in Kingston, check out visitkingston.ca. When it's time to record some tracks, finding the right studio and producer for your music can make a world of difference to the way a recording sounds and feels. Luckily, Kingston and its neighboring communities are home to a lot of recording talent, and today we're joined by two guests that have had a hand in getting Kingston and Canadian music out to the world. Aaron Holmberg is the owner of Full Frequency Productions and spent 15 years as the house engineer at Bathhouse Studios. He's worked with several Canadian staples like the Tragically Hip, Sam Roberts, Bruce Coburn, The Trews, and Jill Barber. And in 2014, he joined the Isabel Bader Center for the Performing Arts as the theater's technical director. And on top of working as a firefighter by day, by night, Zane Whitfield is a patron of the Kingston music scene. Zane is the owner of North of Princess Recording Studio, and just last month, he was a member of the YGK Emerging Artist Competition jury. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
I want to point something out before we get started because we always talk in the podcast about how tight the music community is and everybody's helping everybody. I think it's really cool that we can have, three guys in this case who are in very similar fields sit down and have a conversation for the benefit of the community. So guys, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think we'll start with, how did you guys get into this kind of work?
I got into it early on. I think I was in high school bands and then got a 4-track recorder just out of necessity to record our songs. I wasn't really into the gear that much, but wanted a way to capture our own songs. So I learned recording when I was, grade 10, 11 sort of thing. Then I went to school for it for a year. And then, I was running around Toronto trying to hand out resumes and try and get in somewhere as an intern when I was 20 or so, and I lucked into getting into the hip studio pretty early on via Johnny Fay, the drummer.
That's a pretty sweet gig for that.
Yeah, it was
early
good.
in your
I was
career.
22, I think, when I started there as the ashtray cleaner.
But that's how it works. Yeah, you gotta start.
I started as a gopher, and
Zane?
Similar story. I got a 4-track from my dad for Christmas when I was young. I might have been 13 or 14. Recording other bands and just my own stuff I was working on, and it sort of morphed from there. I just would record other bands, played in a band myself, and when I built my recording studio, it was sort of mostly as a home base for my own band, and it kind of morphed into something more, working with other bands and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, Zane and I actually met when he was with Beta Blocka, and you guys were doing the first full-length record.
That's right.
I think, and brought me in to help record at your jam space. But you had all this gear and you're full-on your
that's
shit
where we
already.
met.
And then while
that's
you were
right.
out playing guitar, then I came in and helped out, brought some extra gear in, and we tracked the Beta Blocka record.
And then we mixed it at the Bathhouse.
Mixed it at the Bathhouse.
Yeah. So we've been longtime buddies, just through that.
Nice.
Kingston community again.
Yeah, totally. Aaron, you mentioned going to school, and I guess, Zane, you didn't go to school for this.
No.
Yeah, and I'm sort of in between. I took radio broadcasting, so there's a little bit of school, but a lot of it was just kind of like yourself, Zane, just kind of working with gear.
Yeah.
I'm curious, there's a lot of programs now out there for recording and for music, and I know I've always been on kind of the fence on, should you go to school and come out with debt and no gear, or take that money and just spend it on gear and just screw around with stuff? What do you guys think?
For me, I would have been, this was 1999 or so, so I guess maybe the internet had been invented then. But this day and age, you can go to Google or YouTube and all that sort of stuff and search stuff online and find all kinds of references. How do I mic a snare drum? How do I, even just the science behind it. But I will say that even though out of 30 people that started in my class, I only did a 1-year program. So it was a pretty quick crash course, sort of a school money grab, but a few of us did graduate. A lot of people just dropped out when they realized it wasn't there to be rock stars. But it was a fast track to know the basics recording principles. And that was really important to me. So if you can do that without spending 10 grand at a school and have the sort of the go online yourself and the self-education, because it is really important, I think, to learn at least the basic, phase and some very technical things that help you get really good sounds. I'm not really a scientific engineer by any means. Like, I don't get the measuring tape out too often for the drum overheads, but it is important to be aware of that stuff. That's why we work so well together.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you get a
I do
tape
when
measure now.
When we're doing the Glyn Johns technique, I'd get the tape measure out.
Yeah. It just looks good when you throw out the tape. And
I use a piece of string sometimes. It looks a little more like old school.
It might be stupid. It's just been something that I've always done. So it's just for that. Though.
Phase correlation, that stuff's important, right? To have your kick drum, if you got 2 mics on a kick drum, one's inside, one's outside, to understand that could be out of phase and getting rid of all your bottom end if they're not proper. So schooling, back to that question, I think is great for me in that sense. It was a 10-month crash course in some really basic stuff. I got my Pro Tools shops for one of the main digital audio workstations, so I was able to learn how to edit really quickly on that. And then when I did get into a real studio, I was well prepared. And then you can experiment like crazy because, you listen to someone like the Flaming Lips. It's Dave Friedman, I think, is the producer. And he's like, I'll do traditional mics on the drum kit and then I'll put up 5 wacky, weird things. And usually those are what I end up using or something, so.
Yeah. No.
But you come from the other school of self-education.
I learned from, I got a subscription to a magazine called Sound on Sound. And I had a subscription for 10 years. Every month an issue would come, and I learned about gear, phase. It was a really in-depth sort of magazine from the UK that just, kind of gave me stuff to think about as I was recording other people. And then really I spent the first 5 years working in the studio trying to follow all the rules of recording. And I've kind of spent the last 5 years
undoing that,
breaking them, learning how to break them. So,
well, you got to learn the rules before you break them.
A little bit, like I think I started first, like just whatever sounds good, and I probably should have just stuck with that.
Well, I always tell people, like, you can spend all this time on gear and educating yourself, which is great, but at the end of the day, use your ears, and your ears are the one tool that's going to be constantly upgrading itself.
Yeah, and that's where your education continues too. I think just training your ears to know, okay, we're working on the drums now, but once we add a bass, the bass is going to sound good with this sound of the drum kit, because eventually it's the sum of the parts.
Yes.
So you learn to have that foreshadowing of what everything's going to tie together eventually. And I think that's when you get to become a better engineer, is anticipating, hey, this is all going to work together. This bass may sound muddy right now, but in the track, it's going to sound amazing.
Well, and I always tell people, especially guitarists, because you dial in your perfect tone, but the engineer might change it, and not because he's screwing with you, but but because he knows what's going to fit in the mix. He knows where it's going to shine and where everything's going to kind of come together.
Yeah,
and then sometimes you tell that guitarist, but really you just got a really shitty guitar sound, but you just say it anyway to sound professional. You're just like, no, this is going to work in the mix, and then you spend hours afterwards like trying to make it sound good.
To fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honey, are you coming to bed soon? Well, because Zane's got his studio out back. Amazing studio. Mm-hmm. But, your wife and kids are 10 feet away in the next house. So it's, you coming to bed? It's like, just got this fucking snare drum just isn't sitting right, honey. I'll be to bed. Like, give me another 20 minutes.
Yeah. Bing, 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 bing. Yeah.
I know we said off mic we're not going to get too far into gear, and I know I wanted to police this and not get too esoteric, but
bring it on. Let's go.
Here we go. No, I did want to talk about gear a little bit, because one of the most common questions I get asked by young people who want to record and get more into music, what do I buy?
Yes, I get asked that a lot.
Yes.
SM7B.
SM7B we're talking on right now.
Mine is a Sennheiser. The rest are SM7Bs. The SM7B is a great microphone.
Yeah.
I love it for the podcast. For certain vocals, it's really good.
It's an interesting thing at the bath. Luckily, I had a silver spoon in my mouth starting to work at the bathhouse when I was 22, because it's U67s, U87s, all these high-end Neumann microphones that are, the price of a house these days. API preamps, Neve preamps, like all the best gear. And when a vocalist would come in, we'd set up the 4 or 5 mics to do a mic shout out. So we got the $4,000 vintage Neumann U67, then a newer condenser mic, and then the SM7B. Half the time it was the SM7B sounded the best, the $700 mic.
And it never sounded the worst.
It never sounded the worst.
True.
Yes. So I mean, but yeah, I would usually say something like a good dynamic mic like this. It'll work on guitars, kick drum, voice, and then a nice condenser mic with some polar patterns.
I just used this mic this week on kick and snare. I had it positioned right over the kick, between the kick and the snare, and with a little bit of compression on it, and best drum sound I've ever got in the studio.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, so let's focus.
Be warned with the SM7B, if you're doing vocals, it needs a lot of gain to get it going.
Yeah.
That's right. So good preamp.
Yeah.
Well,
or
I
a cloud
use
lifter.
I use the cloud lifters
Yeah.
on these,
Yeah.
and it's a great piece
Yeah,
of
that's
gear.
awesome.
Yeah. I've got a similar little adapter.
Yeah, I've got a similar situation. Like if we use you've got a lot of nice API preamps at your studio. You don't need they gain up enough. But I do have like a prosumer Sapphire Gold, Focusrite, and I can't, I've got to take the gain right up to the very top to get something out of this. So then I would say, if you're doing a Focusrite 2-channel thing at home into your computer, you might need the cloud lifter for $100 to boost this mic up.
Yeah.
But again, it's like you guys have acoustic pads in this room. There's a reason this SM7B worked on Zane's kick and snare and drum kit, partially because the room sounded great.
That's true.
And the kit sounds great.
Yes,
That's true.
We wanted to get into that too. Yeah, one of the most important things is the room.
Not to skip the gear thing, but yeah, the source is, you want that source sound to be as best as you can. Like sitting out there with headphones on while the engineer's talking to me over headphones, being like, move the microphone just 2 inches to the right. Stop. Okay, back half an inch. That's it. I'm like, okay, really? But that's,
Well, I hate when recordings start to sound way too digital, when you can tell they've just thrown plug-in after plug-in over top of it. Like I always tell people, get the best sound you can going in. It just saves you so much trouble later on.
Yeah.
I almost always try and, as I'm miking stuff up and getting sounds, I go as long as I can before I put any plugins on, with just faders and pan.
Yeah.
And flipping phase. Just do those things, and
Often then I'll throw a plugin, an EQ plugin on. There's corrective EQing, and then there's creative EQing. The creative EQing sort of is whatever, you're blending things into a mix. The corrective EQing, I'll often go spend an hour on the snare drum at 12 at night, and then by the end of it, it's just flat. It's back to where it was somewhat, or small moves make a big difference too.
Riley Jabour, I think I should have gotten you a buzzer or something.
When it sounds like you're not speaking English anymore,
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
just get up and
Zane
drink
and
a
I
bottle of
might
water.
preface this by saying we're not really gear guys, but yeah, we are.
we weren't talking about gear. We were just talking more about
science and frequencies.
Philosophy of
Yeah.
So far, we've only talked about the SM7B.
Yeah. Can you tip your baseball hat up a bit? I think it's cutting the 8K out of your voice a little bit.
Do you want to bring us back to earth for a second?
I want to roll back the tape for a second, because you started talking about comparing mics and an SM7B versus a Neumann that's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. As somebody who's not a gear guy at all, super, super far removed from you guys, I'm curious if there's a threshold where, you can tell the difference between a $200 mic and a $6,000 mic, but mics and equipment keep going up from there. And I'm reminded of, I think it was a bit I heard on a Mark Maron comedy special, where he went to go listen to records at Jack White's house, and Jack White's equipment is $100,000. So he's like, oh, I got to get this. And he went out and he spent $20,000 on a Macintosh turntable and had this amazing setup. And he's like, fuck, it sounds the same as my $500 thing I just got rid of. Is there a threshold for you guys in that same world?
I wouldn't be able to tell you. Like Aaron and I were talking about this earlier. It's just I've got a couple of beautiful tube mics that my dad makes for my recording studio.
Yeah, they're stunning.
And I've shared them with Aaron and other engineers that come and work, that are friends of mine that work in the studio, and everybody enjoys working with them. And there's one mic in particular. It's based on a U67, but I couldn't even tell you, but my dad would kill me if he heard this podcast and I didn't know the details of what the magic is in that mic. It just sounds great.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's no question about that.
And we've worked with the real deal. Like, or I have a lot at the bathhouse with these high-end mics, and you know, until you put them right up beside each other, you can't. I mean, it's sort of like television or going to see the cinema. You know, going to a movie. 4K is much different than 1080p versus 480 or whatever DVD quality, or your rabbit ears. So it's kind of like that in a way. And sometimes in a way, I don't really want to watch 4K.
Yeah.
I don't want
good
things to be
analogy.
that clear. I want to go see the new Quentin Tarantino that has this, you know, real 35 millimeter sheen over it that has a bit of grain and stuff. So, you know, you don't need the high. I know I understand Jack White. I mean, he has the money and also probably is a big gearhead.
And maybe he doesn't know the difference either.
No, he might be like, I
Doesn't
don't
even know
really
what he
know, but
spent on. He just guesses.
Yeah.
And I bet you if you asked him, he'd say his Desert Island mic would be an SM7B or a 57.
Yeah.
So there you go.
We need to send this to Shure. They might sponsor us.
Yeah.
Desert Island microphones. That's a
I'd take another couple of those.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people use your ears and develop your sensitivity and start with something basic because you can't. Like if you start basic, like with a Rode, or we keep coming back to Shure or something like that, if you don't know the difference between that and the Neumann, then there's no point. So, you know, sort of use your ears, build that sensitivity, and then make the upgrades as your ears upgrade.
Yeah, totally.
If they upgrade.
Go back to the gears question of like, what should I buy? It's like you know, have your color palette. You can't be you're painting in black and white and you want to be in color. So you do need a variety of gear. It doesn't need to be the high end stuff. You need your SM7B and then a nice condenser mic that maybe has some polar patterns on it. That's $250, like the Audio Technicas they sell at Canada Computers. The 2020s or something, $150, or the step up is the 2040, that's $220. Start there so you know the difference. Have a dynamic mic, have a condenser mic, and then start getting gearitis.
I think it just happens. You just can't help yourself when you're first starting it. Like right now, I feel like I've got all the gear that I need. Like sometimes I get excited about something, but I'm not like checking my Sound on Sound magazine wondering about what's the latest greatest. Like I feel like I've gone beyond that, but it's it's hard to tell somebody who's just starting out, has no gear, like just get whatever and work with it. People want to hear like what do you recommend? But I could say this. So if we did have this conversation last week with the band I was working with, and there is an advantage to limiting your options, right? So when you have all these options, it doesn't necessarily make things better for you. It's fine to say like, I'm going to try and cut as much as I can with like these two mics, like this condenser mic and this dynamic mic, and just work with that and learn like all of the things. Like I've got a mic pre at home, one of my favorites. It's a Great River. It's a high-end mic pre. There's two knobs and like a phase switch and like an impedance button on it. And I've been using it for 15 years and I still feel like I'm learning it.
Yeah.
Like, the one thing is 5 dB steps, like decibel steps, and the other is just like a fine-tune thing. And there is a lot of stuff in that still, like to pull from. You'd think, well, that's how it sounds, but you can get a lot of different sounds out of those two buttons.
No, that was often a favorite sort of thing in terms of guitar amps too at the bathhouse, where I saw a lot of different amps through all the people that recorded there. And often the choice is like, you don't need a giant amp for recording. The microphone doesn't really know how big the amp is, that it's a, 10 cones or whatever, 8, is that a thing? 8, 10 cones?
8, 10, that's a doobie
thing.
I'll take a pack of 8 doobie cones, please.
Or if you got a small amplifier, whatever sounds good coming out of it. And often it was just like, we wanted the tone and volume knob and get rid of everything else. Unless you know the amp, like Rob Baker knows his Mesa Boogies like the back of his hand that have like a ton of knobs and lots of options and stuff. But same thing with those, I'd say. Get a good amplifier with a tone, and you don't have all these things that you have to think about.
Yeah, that's true. Because you end up just screwing with it in the box anyway, like in your software, and shaping it into your mix. So,
Well, let's move on. We've done a lot of gear now, so let's move on a little bit.
Done.
Trust me, I'm sure we'll come back to it. Let's say you are a band that's starting out. You've bought your AT2020, you moved up to your AT2040, you bought your SM7B by Shure, and then you're thinking you're ready to move on to a studio. How does a band know when they're at that point, and what do they need to do to get to that point? Because I'm sure that you all can speak from experience. There's a certain level of readiness that a band needs to have that they might not realize that they don't have when they're ready to move into a studio. Or we can talk about gear again. I don't know. There's a lot of silence.
State of readiness, I would say. So one big thing.
Good songs.
Is, well, I mean, that should go right back to the start then. Yeah, I'm already a few steps past that. But yeah, good songs, well rehearsed, so you can, just feel comfortable in knowing the parts. Be ready to change things and not be too married to things, because it's like, and again, it's really like about shopping your producer or engineer. Are you looking for a producer or are you looking for an engineer? If you're, or are you
what's the difference? A lot of people don't know the difference.
So again, gray areas, but the black and white of it, I would say, is a producer is going to jump in there as you say you got 5 band members, the 6th member of the band, and help you with arrangements. Say, this song's like 5 minutes long. Maybe it could be cut that chorus into, the second one can just be a single chorus, and take this part out, or why don't we start the song with the bridge, help with arrangements and creativity, and then also sort of just help facilitate, like when you go into the studio for the first time or second time, this is how this works, and then the engineer is more of a person, if you're kind of ready to we know we want the songs like this, we want a little bit of like advice from the engineer, but really we've got these songs the way we want them, we just want to come in and track. Then you've got the guy that's gonna or girl that's gonna do all the technical stuff, know how to set the mics up for you properly, walk you through everything, and then you just bang your songs out.
Yeah, I find any good producer that I've worked with is a good engineer in their own right as well. They know how to get good sounds. So
another great thing is tempo. So click tracks are huge help in the studio. But if you're not prepared, I've met drummers who have been drumming for 15 years and aren't great playing at click tracks. Vice versa. Some are amazing. They can play around the click tracks moving. They can play ahead of the beat. They can play behind. None of the rest of the band listens to it anyways. Just follow your drummer. That can be a big help, especially for editing these days. You cut 4 takes of a song. It's like, man, the chorus from that 3rd take, can we just drop that into the 2nd? It makes it very easy. At the same time, I just worked with a band recently where we started, and the drummer is amazing at playing to click tracks, and it just wasn't the vibe. It sort of was, they wanted to naturally speed up a bit in a chorus, and unless you're mapping out the whole tempo map, it was just making everything stiff. And they're a great band, and they play in well in time, so we just got rid of the click track because it's not on the vibe.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with whatever feels most comfortable. You don't have to force somebody into to recording to a click, But I
think rehearsing that a bit beforehand would be important, maybe, as a band, to have the drummer with at least a little click meter beside him with a one headphone in or something, and trying to kind of keep the band and the band getting used to listening to the drummer and following him or her.
Yeah. Being prepared, that's the thing for sure. Go into a studio. I mean, and picking the spot, the person you're going to work with. Do you like what they've done in the past? And if you do, then chances are you're going to ante up from recording in your bedroom with a couple of crappy mics.
I always felt like it must be so hard for bands, even though I've come from a band background a little bit, but for bands to work really hard and write songs for maybe a year or maybe 2 years or maybe 3 years, and then finally decide to hand over this baby to somebody else and pick a producer or an engineer, because it really is a personality match almost more than anything, Yeah,
I think just working with somebody that you can get along with and that you like the work that person has done in the past.
How will people know what studio is right for them?
What's coming out of that studio? So look at the background. If it's all heavy metal and you're a folk singer, maybe it's not.
Maybe it's not the right match.
Yeah.
I work with bands that come from out of town that come to my studio, and you just wonder, what would make you think to come here and record, And so things that I focus on in the studio and the way I run my studio is things like hospitality and making sure the band feels super comfortable. It's a service industry that I'm providing there, so I like to focus on those kind of things. And it's a mix of that, and also people maybe just wanting to get out of their comfort zone, out of their town to, record elsewhere, like if you come and stay with me and you're just focused in one spot and we're working on recording at my place. And that was what the bathhouse was like as well, right?
Yeah.
That's why it was a destination.
It's a destination thing. It's 5 bedrooms upstairs. Everyone comes and stays there, whether it's a 2-day session or a 28-day session. You're there and it's a vibe. You're basically going to a cottage with a whole bunch of really amazing gear and a cool atmosphere. So pick your atmosphere. I mean, to be honest, practically it's money. That's one of the first things bands are going to look at, I think, is like, if we go to this studio, it's going to be X amount a day. If we go here, it's going to be this much a day. This studio is a bit cheaper, but I feel like we're going to, they say we can load in the night before and get set up. And it's an unfortunate thing, but money is probably one of the first things people are going to look at is this, can I afford a $500 a day studio or a $1,500 a day studio? And then what do you want to get out of that? And if you got your budget and you think, we got 3 days for this, or we've got 1 day to record, maybe don't be writing a song that day in the studio or pulling out a giant synthesizer because you will lose 4 hours with a synth trying to find a cool sound.
Yep. Actually, that gets me to thinking about another thing that I've, especially more recently with bands releasing singles and this kind of thing, I would strongly consider focusing your efforts into maybe a smaller number of songs than, feeling you got to record 10 songs and put out an entire record. There's a lot of resources that goes into that. And unless your band is all about, creating like an album as like an entire piece, there's a big advantage into pouring more resources, like money, time, effort into maybe a song or two. And seeing what happens. Like I've seen a lot of records, and I've made them before, where you're working on something that you started like a year prior, and as a band, you've moved on, and you're working on new music and this kind of stuff. So you've got, especially if you've just got filler tracks, like tracks that you're not completely passionate about as being like your best material out there. I mean, when I played in a band, I always thought like I'm working on something right now, but I just know deep down that it's not the best that I'm going to do. There's something else that's going to come out after this. So, why spend a year and a whole pile of money making a 10-song record when you can just like put out a single?
Well, and that too is if you do take that year and wait for, doing all those 10 songs, they may go slightly stale, or you write some better stuff you wish was on there. And then those songs you were really excited about, the 2 or 3, they maybe don't end up seeing the light of day, and that you need to serve those songs, just get them out. And, especially this day and age where we're back to like the 1950s with singles and stuff kind of like, and then like you say too, just budget wise, it's like, one of the biggest time constraints, or not time constraints, but it takes a lot of time to set up the drum kit. And get everybody wired up in mics. So it's one thing, maybe, do 2 or 3 songs. So once you're up, that first song's going to take like 5 hours, but then you can bang a couple more out, in the same day or something.
That's good advice, yeah.
But then go play some gigs and get some money and do the next session. Or, I don't know. There's all kinds of ways to
And
do
we're kind of talking about like people that are just starting out and people that haven't been in a studio before, But even I was just working with a band this week, like I said, with a band called the Blue Stones, and this is their sophomore record that we're working on, and their release strategy, they're supported by a label, and their release strategy is singles. So we worked on 2 songs this week, and they're coming back in a few more weeks to work on some more, and then possibly later on. But I mean, big name bands with like label money and that kind of stuff are doing it this way as well. There's no reason why any indie band or somebody just starting out can't kind of hone their sound that way by doing the single route.
Yeah.
I'd actually seen a couple of posts on your Facebook page this week about the Blue Stones being in studio, and that kind of led me to thinking, is there any stuff you have been working on specifically recently that you're excited for the release of, or some of your most proud moments, anything that you feel like you really hit the pinnacle of exactly what you wanted to do in studio with any particular bands or any particular pieces that you've done in the past?
This year has been very good. I started my year with recording the new Glorious Sons record with a producer from LA, and it was like a month and a half of recording with that band, and that was very cool. So that was like 10 years of working in the studio to kind of work at a higher level than I have in the past. So that was pretty cool. Aaron came in as well and did some engineering, and I worked with a couple of other engineers in the studio.
I put my glasses with the tape on them on and just did some drum editing. Yeah.
Well, you killed it though.
Zoinks.
No, yeah, that was a cool experience. So, and also been working with Kathleen Edwards and Jim Bryson in there. I've done a bunch of records with Jim, but it's working with Kathleen this year has been pretty cool. And the Blue Stones, they're awesome band. So it's been good this year for sure.
Yeah, I've been working away on, it's funny, we just talked about this, sort of like just come in and do 2 songs or 3 songs and get some singles out, because I've worked on 2 records for a year now. One with Chris and Dee. So Chris Abbott's from Pursuit of Happiness, and Chris and Dee, Chris's partner Dee, they've been doing folk music, pop folk, I guess. This is their 4th record. I've worked on a couple with them a long time ago when I was working at the Bathhouse, and this one is going to come out in October. We're finished mixing, mastering, but it was really fun because I jumped into the producer role with them. Chris wanted to take a sort of more of a musician role, because her and Dee kind of co-produced their last record, I think, and so. That said, too, I was also able to play some bass on it, and I did some string arrangements and stuff. So I really felt like I was, as a producer, part of the band for that 10 songs. So, and because it was recorded at their house, which they have an awesome little studio space similar to this with great, sound control and stuff and some good mics. I brought in some good gear, and we were able to just sort of piece it together, guitar at a time. There's not really a full drum kit except for on 2 or 3 songs. So we didn't have to do the full session with like 10 drum mics and that sort of thing. But that was a really enjoyable process. And because we didn't draw it out too long, because we knew we suddenly had a mastering deadline and wanted to create these sort of timeline so we wouldn't kind of just keep going and going and going. But at the same time, we had all this time with no studio clock counting away. So we were really able to focus in on it, and that's coming out. And then Justin Bird, who's another local musician, his band Thorns of Venus with Alec Barkin and John Bunny Stewart and Rob Radford, Benji Perozan, another one we've been working away at here and there. They'll come in, we'll do 2 or 3 songs, they'll do some gigs, make some money, we'll do a couple more songs. That's going to be coming out soon too, and that's more of a big rocker kind of eclectic. It's typical Justin Bird. It's sort of...
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds
so
really good.
That should be done soon. We've got all the songs tracked, I think, and we're basically just into mixing and overdubbing.
Any sort of common mistakes that you think people should look out for? Stuff that you're like, oh, just makes you kind of cringe inside? Is there something that you hear in there that just...
Room tone.
Yeah.
Record in a decent sounding room. Put packing blankets, or go to U-Haul, or the blankets you use to move your furniture around. Put a couple of mic stands on set to T-bars and throw the blankets over them if you don't have anything else. The egg carton thing doesn't really work, apparently. It's just too thin, and this sort of, I don't know what you even call it, just foam squares. Just try and make the room, if you don't have options of rooms, just try and make the room sound as good as you can.
Actually, a cheap alternative to the foam squares that you see in a lot of studios is get that foam padding that you put on a bed. Because it's very, very similar. It's just kind of, similar patterns as well.
I flipped a mattress up on its side before, try and get the room toned down a little bit. It doesn't have to be dead. You want a bit of a lively room, but if you have a square shaped room, it's going to tend to things are going to bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
And if it's small, so that's a huge thing. And then
just recording too hot and clipping into your converters and that kind of stuff.
Mic placement, big time. Especially if you're trying to record drums at home, you don't need 10 mics. Like Zane and I both use a thing called the Glyn Johns technique, which we've augmented a little bit. The original, I think, is just 3 mics, but you put a microphone above the snare drum, 35 or 40 inches above the snare. Then you put the other microphone, ideally 2 condensers, by the floor tom facing in at like waist height. And that's where we get the measuring tape out, and because the phase has to be in order. And then a kick drum mic. Snare mic, and that's it. You're basically like, I guess, 4. You could do it with 4 mics, and it sounds amazing.
Less is more. You don't need 15 stacked guitars.
Yeah, that's true. I used to, when I was younger, definitely was like, well, what we need something else. It's like, well, no, it just needs maybe a different guitar part instead of 5 guitars. Make each part really count. And if you're adding something, and if it's not wowing you, and that's the part, keep working at it. It's patience. You'll hit it at some point. You'll find the right sound, the right part.
Another option too is if you're recording at home and you just want to up the ante on whatever you're working on and stuff like that. There's nothing like I've worked with bands before where they come in, record some drums, maybe work a little bit on a few things, but then take those tracks away and add your guitar parts at your own pace.
That's a really good point. That's a great budget way too, is come into the studio, get your drum tracks, or have the band play live off the floor, but just go for that drum track. If everyone else screws up but the drummer didn't, take that and overdub, because that's what you can't necessarily get at home with a bunch of nice microphones and preamps as your drum sound. But you go home, you have one decent preamp, one good mic, and do your overdubs.
You can record everything and take your time with that. Like, I know both Aaron and I are not, if you come and record drums with me, I'll happily give you, we'll give you the files to go and work away at it and stuff like that, it's some studios might be a little bit more protective of the files that they work with and stuff. I don't know, photographers sometimes have that issue, with handing photographs off to people, but we're just here to help people make records and make them sound as good as they can. So it's
Well, we always come back to there's so much great talent in this city, and it's nice to know there are people like yourselves making it sound even better than it already does. So, Aaron, Zane, thanks so much for coming in.
Awesome.
And
Thanks for having us.
And warping everybody's brains with all the...
We didn't even really get that.
No,
it could have been a lot worse.
Talk about white noise, pink noise, oscillators.
Oh, yeah. You should be a fly on the wall when we go on a double date with our wives.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
They start talking and they're like, hey, what's the 2K on the snare drum? I just couldn't get it out of it.
They're ordering he's just like, just keep bringing the drinks.
Yeah.
This has been Kingston Live. We encourage you to rate us on your listening platform of choice and subscribe where possible. Kingston Live was recorded in Kingston by Titan Sound. Hosted by John Sanfilippo and Riley Jabour. Writing and research by Peter Sanfilippo. Executive producer Rob Howard. Opinions expressed by Kingston Live guests are their own and don't necessarily represent the opinions of Kingston Live producers and staff. A big thanks to the support of Tourism Kingston, who helped make this podcast possible. Check out the latest live music listings and many other experiences the city has to offer at visitkingston.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Email your thoughts, ideas, comments to podcast@kingstonlive.ca.